So I want to start with something that is a very loose connection to Banjo-Kazooie, as I see it, which is that in Diddy Kong Racing, the game ends with a party on the beach. And this party on the beach is interrupted by a pig sort of flying off into space and being greeted by his own spaceship, a UFO kind of thing that comes and greets him and abducts him, right? Banjo-Kazooie does something similar, but does it in two phases. In Banjo-Kazooie itself, we also end with the beach party, and this beach party isn't interrupted exactly, but it's sort of intruded by Captain Blubber, who enters into the scene and then just whizzes off. And then in Banjo-Tooie, Captain Blubber does the same thing, but he does it in a UFO, riding a UFO. So, again, that's why I say this is a very loose kind of connection. That's why I want to get it out of the way first, because I think there is something to it, but I don't really have nothing else. I don't have anything to back it up with, so I'm just going to get it out first. Just this idea that Captain Blubber is somehow associated to UFOs in some way, through in two phases, as I said. So by combining first Banjo-Kazooie and then Banjo-Tooie, and then a similar kind of thing plays out in Diddy Kong Racing, essentially, right? A beach party, so a party that takes place on the shore next to the ocean. So these creatures come from the ocean, so the depths, the unconscious in some way. In Banjo-Kazooie, it's space, which I think plays a similar kind of role. They come from the ocean and sort of intrude or interact with the beach in some way, as if having a party on the beach is summoning an encounter with the unconscious in some way. So yeah, that's one of the things I find is an interesting kind of link between these two scenes. So that's one thing to kind of maybe that I would like to keep in mind. Secondly, kind of connected to the beach thing, is that a lighthouse somehow has a connection to ships and spaceships and vessels in general, in that that's its purpose, right? Is to guide an incoming ship from the ocean so that it guides it to the shore. And so the fact that a spaceship comes to pick Whizpig up next to a lighthouse seems interesting to me. The lighthouse is the place of meeting. It's the meeting place for vessels. In this case, it's purely symbolic because the spaceship doesn't require the lighthouse, but the lighthouse here is like a symbolic meeting place for vessels, and itself becomes a spaceship, of course. So the lighthouse kind of symbolizes something to do with ships in any case. So that's one potential kind of link to Banjo-Kazooie. A second one is that there is a strange similarity I find between the main hub world and Spiral Mountain, in that here the main hub world is also a giant stone face of the villain, and this stone face is to be entered through the mouth, in the same way that in Spiral Mountain, you've got to enter through Gruntilda's stone mouth. And I would even say that in Banjo-Kazooie, the spiral is an upward movement, right? It's an upward spiral that culminates in an entryway into this mouth of a stone effigy of the villain. And in Diddy Kong Racing, it's almost as if there is no explicit upward movement in the ground, but as I wanted to explore in the previous videos, I think that there is a general theme of ascent in the game, as represented, for example, in the fact that the most valuable objects you want to collect in this game are helium balloons that flow upward, and other such sort of connections like that to me suggest that in this game there is an upward sort of movement, and you meet Whizpig up in the sky. That's his habitat. So that, yeah, I feel as if the spiral of Spiral Mountain is implied in the game's progression itself. You are collecting balloons and getting higher and higher in some way until you're able to enter through Whizpig's mouth. You've reached a sufficient height that you're able to enter, kind of thing. And of course, both games also have another similarity in that both villains are wizards in some way, sorcerers. So they seem to exist somehow in similar kind of thematic universes, in the kind of adventure that implies an encounter with a wizard archetype. Furthermore, you are being aided by a good wizard. So it's a good wizard versus bad wizard kind of thing, where, right, you're being aided by Mumbo Jumbo in Banjo-Kazooie, and you're being aided by Taj in Diddy Kong Racing. So the help you get is from a symmetrical mirror image to the villain, who is also a sorcerer. And in this game, you know, the kind of the similarity is highlighted in that both wizards occupy the same place in the mountain, right? They both live in the mountain in some way. So, yeah, that's a bunch of things that I feel have to do with possible similarities. And since we're on the topic of the main hub area of the game itself, then I also want to point out a few what I think are interesting patterns that emerge in the hub area. Being that you have an interesting sort of symmetry between the levels. On the one hand, next to Whizpig's statue, we have the entrances to Dino Domain and Dragon Forest, both of which imply dragons in some way, right? Dinosaurs, dragons, big lizards of some kind are implied in both of these levels. And then the bottom levels, Sherbet Island and Snowflake Mountain, imply ice in some way. Sherbet is an ice cream, right? And snowflake. So we have a similarity between the levels above and the levels below. And I would even suggest that Dino Domain and Dragon Forest both kind of imply that there is an association between dragons and fire. On the one hand, the boss of Dragon Forest is called Smokey, so that also brings up fire, smoke. And Dino Domain has sort of many decorative volcanoes and so forth. So it's also kind of associated to lava, fire, and so on. So instantly there seems to be this sort of parallelism between the upper levels being fire and the lower levels being water or ice, sort of hot and cold, a hot and cold kind of duality between them. And I would even say, but this is more tentative really on my part, that there is also a left-right thing going on, in that the areas that are to the right of this particular image, but like to the left of Whizbig's statue, from his perspective, are Dino Domain and Snowflake Mountain, both of which I think could potentially be associated to mountains and peaks in some way. Dino Domain is the only area where the boss battle is literally an ascent up a spiral mountain. And as I said, it's kind of decorated with volcanoes and so on. So I think it could potentially resonate with the idea of a mountain, as does Snowflake Mountain. Not just because it's called Snowflake Mountain, but also like one of the sub areas has the word pyramid in it as well. So it has this sort of upward movement kind of feeling about it. And then Sherbet Island and Dragon Forest, I'm tempted to say that they imply somehow the opposite. Not in the sense of a valley, but in the sense of something that is hidden in the depths or surrounded by the depths in some way. Like a forest is a place where, you're kind of protected from sunlight. It's the opposite of a mountain in some way. I mean, if you indulge me in this kind of an explanation, where a forest is, protected by shadow. It's slightly more, it's shadowier, I think. And an island could potentially have that feeling to it, in that it's closer to the water. It's closer to the shore, as we were saying before, right? So it's closer to the depths. So that's just a general idea that I get, that there is some sort of a weird symmetry going on between the levels, and that progression through the levels is of a spiral kind of nature, an upward spiral, which culminates in future Funland. And so, yeah, so I think that's sort of enough for now, but these are things that I would like to keep in mind in future analyses, basically. So yeah.